Here is a holiday reminder for all of you listeners and for ourselves here, me and Magnus. I can spell Christmas without a U, but that would break my heart in two. You can spell Christmas without a me, but that would be a tragedy. And another tragedy would be a world without the Bob's Burgers holiday specials, of which today we're going to talk about two of my personal favorite of the Christmas specials. They do a really great job. Bob's Burgers always does a really great job with the holiday special. Generally, it's a really great show, and we're gonna have several different
Mm.
episodes about Bob's in different ways. But I really, particularly around the holiday season, love these particular episodes. Hello, Magnus. Welcome to the holidays. I hope your tree is up. It's now after Halloween, and as Linda mandates, all trees must be up, even if you have to rebuy a new fresh tree every couple of days.
Well, we haven't quite got there yet, although my other half asked me earlier today, "Oh, so shall we decorate this Saturday?" And
See,
so,
what you need is American Thanksgiving because you get like that buffer
mm,
where you can still use fall colors, and then the day after is when you start decorating for Christmas. So,
when is Thanksgiving again? It slips my mind being so European.
being so European, you get some great holidays though. We don't have like a
Mm,
Boxing Day or like a lot of really cool New Year's traditions. You have some really cool stuff over there across the Atlantic. So by the time people listening to this, Thanksgiving will have come and gone. Actually, when people are listening to our Muppet Christmas Carol episode,
mm,
is the week that Thanksgiving is, to give you an idea.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's coming up, but it's not quite yet. But Bobby Burgers does a really good job generally of the episodes. We both really have a fondness for Bob's Burgers. Before we talk about these
Yes.
particular episodes,
Mm.
Magnus, what do you love about Bob's just generally as a show?
I love the fact that it has such a clear um element of heart in pretty much everything it does. Uh, at its core, it is very much a story about a family. And I know that a lot of shows are, about families and everything. But Bob's, in a way, it always manages to both bring the story back to the element of family and also show how the five highly dysfunctional members of the Belcher clan all care for each other in their own different ways, and it's both obvious and not so obvious sometimes how they do it. Um, but it's so nice to see just a really quite actually wholesome showing of what true love can be towards people that you really care for. I could probably sit here and do a whole episode talking about my favorite moments from the show of how they demonstrate their kindness and compassion for one another. But I shall stop myself before I go too full into that.
No, it's good. That's why we're going to do several Bob's episodes because I think
Mm,
there's something really for every kind of person that likes
mm,
what Bob's offers.
yeah.
I would argue there's actually 6 family members because I think Teddy really has ingratiated himself into the family. So I do think Uncle Teddy should be considered a Belcher, or as he likes to say, a Burger, because
True.
he definitely thinks the Belcher's last name is Burger. Um, definitely get that sense from the episode.
Yes.
I really like Bob's because and the reasons I like Bob's kind of vary between seasons. In some
Mm,
seasons, I like it because it's so overtly queer and it doesn't shy away from its own queerness.
yep.
Sometimes the kids' adventures are so good that I love it because it's so honest about what children are like. Children are kind of purely ego driven, a little grotesque, a little weird, a little
Yep.
shameless. It does not shy away from that. In a way, it kind
No.
of mimics great American kids. A
Yep.
little bit like how we saw in Boy Meets World, a little bit like what we saw in
Yes.
Roseanne. It has a
Mm,
sitcom quality to it, but it pulls back before it gets too saccharine. Um,
yep.
yeah, so I
I,
No, go
I was
for it.
gonna say all the kids, like you were saying about like how unashamedly they embrace themselves,
Yeah.
and you could say that about all the kids, but I think with Tina in particular, and the fact that she's like fully embracing her emerging sexuality and such,
Yeah.
and her love for her very unique brand of erotica is quite something brilliant to see
So
in
I
its own way.
really, I really like that they made Tina a girl because originally in the pilot
Mm,
episode that they made for proof of concept, which we're going to talk a little bit here because it fits in with this episode.
yeah.
Originally, Tina was a boy, so I actually like that
Mm,
they made Tina a girl, but
yeah.
kept that kind of. One of my favorite episodes is Mazel Tina, where she takes over Tamley's bat mitzvah. And basically gets to come of age as a woman. I like that episode. I think it's great, but that is for another time and place. I think
Mm,
these two episodes in particular showcase the best of Bob's because they're a celebration of the Christmas in the weird New Jersey esque world they live in. It's a celebration of side characters, a celebration of queerness, and it's a celebration of the kind of bond that puts this family together. There are a few other Christmas episodes.
mm,
I don't particularly. I mean, I like them well enough, but when I think about Christmas
yeah.
in the Bob Burger sense, I think about and these were these two episodes. Last Gingerbread House on the Left came out in 2016. The Bleakening parts 1 and 2 came out in 2017. So they follow on the heels of each other year to year.
Mm,
But they're so different, and I think they're so reverent, and I'm very excited to kind of crack into them and kind of what they mean for the series and what they mean to us.
mm,
Um, yeah,
yeah. So, shall we, as you say, crack on then?
crack on. We have a funeral parlor on our stage left, and we have a semi permanently vacant but also semi taken building on stage right, and we have a an apartment building with a burger joint at the bottom that's totally structurally sound, and I'm sure Mr. Fischoeder has not at all left in a state of disrepair.
Mm,
So Last Gingerbread House on the left from 2016. I want to kind of start with that
yes.
because that comes first.
Mm,
This has one of the better, I think, pre-episode setups because you don't see how it's going to affect the rest of the episode, but it really does. The albino polar bear cub, because polar bear cubs are already white, so having it be, it's just like an extra thing of how is it albino, but everyone just accepts it. It's also
mm,
one of the few episodes where we actually see the Belchers watching the magic TV that isn't always there, but whenever they need the TV for an episode, it's just kind of hanging up in the corner, but it only exists in the episodes where they need it. I think with Bob's continuity, I think continuity in Bob's, you'd probably find the same continuity issues you find in things like Golden Girls, where
mm,
because the point of the Golden Girls slowly morphed out of continuity and more toward found family, it's very
yes.
possible, but you're not really watching Bob's for the authenticity of the experience. You're watching Bob's for the authenticity of the family and the adventures they're going to get into, both
Yes.
kind of the mundane and also how they're self-deprecating about themselves, but not in a way where it makes you feel bad about yourself. Like Bob is very frank about how overweight and out of shape he is, but like
Mm.
it never feels like it's so self-deprecating that he like actually really hates himself for it. It's just in an emergency when he needs to be fit, he's not fit. And so much later when they're calling each other stupid because they're getting lost in the snow on Christmas Eve at in like midnight, it you feel the danger, but it also feels like you're with the Belcher family, so it's not quite so bad, I guess.
Mm. Yes, it doesn't. They're quite honest with each other and themselves about themselves.
Yeah.
But it never goes into like a depressing or despair territory. It's just sort of a amusing frankness, shall we
Yeah.
say?
Because they
Yes.
live together and they see each other all the time, and so there's no reason not to be honest. Uh, and
Hmm.
Yeah, and so
It's
I love this episode because usually when they cut the family off from each other, it's usually the parents are going one direction, kids are going another. This cuts
yes.
Bob off in a really interesting way, but it does bring it back around to Bob at the end of the episode.
Mm,
There's a lot of references in the Bleakening later to the season. I think it's the season ending of season one, but in streaming services, it's the opening of season two, the one with the Taffy
mm,
Factory.
yeah.
And that's kind of a great way that we'll see of the tradition of splitting the kids and the adults up. But here, Linda gets to stay with the kids.
Mm,
Um, and they don't really want to go caroling, but she's really into it. And the continuing saga of Linda buying things outside of the market for a low price,
oh,
which brings joy to my heart because that's such a mom thing to do. Of
yeah.
being like, oh, I got this price for a special thing, not
It,
inside the store, but I got it somewhere, and here it is. It's gonna be great.
it it's a sign. I knew that this was meant to be
Yeah,
sort of thing. And that is actually a good way that you mentioned about Teddy before. That's a great way that they actually end up including Teddy in this episode in a quite natural way
caroling
because
caroling
yeah,
dad. I'm not replacing your
yeah.
dad. I'm just your caroling dad.
Oh,
Call me dad if you want. It's so needy, but it's so on brand. But it's not like it doesn't feel
mm,
suffocatingly needy. It just feels like Teddy loves them and see because Teddy is a part of
yeah.
the family because he's there every day. He eats burgers more often than they do because they
Yeah.
go quote unquote off menu is what they say.
Uh,
Um,
he's on all honesty probably keep them in business. I've got to say, the amount of money he probably spends in there.
Yeah, even we don't even see Mort as much there.
No,
We definitely don't see the mailman as much there.
no.
But Caroling Dad is great. The warm up scene in the car with Linda and the kids going
La
like
la 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 la
warming.
la la.
Yeah, that which is not a warm up technique anywhere, and they just go with it because they don't know they're here for the hot chocolate and the cider, and like that's the end goal. They're not here for the romanticism of the hands across America that Linda has conjured in her
Oh
mind.
yes.
My favorite thing about Linda is that she wants so hard and so much, and it's so transparent. And you can see it
Yeah.
in her kids, but Linda going right from caroling to like Hands Across America is great. And for anyone listening that doesn't know what that joke means, Hands Across America was a thing in like the 70s. So if you remember, there was that Coca-Cola ad that they did at the end of Mad Men that was based on a real Coca-Cola ad with a whole bunch of people on a hill singing about wanting Coca-Cola. So Hands Across America like came out of that movement to like create peace by having everyone grab hands and like make a chain across. I don't know if it was America or the world, but the Hands Across America joke is very much a Linda thing. Like it's like a Linda and a Rose Nyland thing where it seems like something that works for them because there's a childlike idealism to it.
Mm,
But Linda's just the adult that goes full tilt, full force, full romance into the world,
yes.
and we see that in every single holiday episode except for Thanksgiving because that's Bob's holiday. But we're gonna
Mm.
do those episodes later.
Indeed. And it's a great, this is one of the defining points between Linda and Bob is the fact that and this is a great example of the dynamic of their relationship that Bob is usually the more grounded one, unless he gets into competition and then he just goes slightly crazy.
Yes.
Um, whilst Linda has the dreams and aspirations, and I think they need each other for their different strengths and qualities they bring out of each other. But they also admire those different qualities in each other. You never see, although Bob may disagree sometimes, um, he's always supportive of his wife and like her aspirations and such. Um, with these two episodes, something that they share is like Linda's drive, like her drive to spread a bit of like festive holiday cheer. You see it more in the Bleakening, where and but it's still very present in this episode, which admittedly the gingerbread episode is a Bob centric episode, whilst the Bleakening two-parter is like a Linda centric episode in the sort of like the driving force, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. But at the same time, they still share that. Um,
I
and
think
what's
Teddy
really
is actually the driving force in both these episodes, but I will explain why when we get to the
okay,
places where I think that is. But we'll see how you
okay.
feel after I explain my reason.
Um, my little point about that is it's great that Bob is always supportive though of his wife, and like she woke up in the middle of the night and said, "We have to make some Christmas cheer for the Bleakening." And he, even though he was exhausted, he went on with it. But
Yeah.
that's something for the next lot. Back to the
There
gingerbread.
there's something really great about Bob and Linda because on
Mm,
TV, you really don't see married couples falling in love with each other over and over again. And I feel like no matter
yes.
how many seasons of Bob's Burgers we get, every season there is a moment where you see them falling in love and learning about each other at the age they're currently at.
Mm,
And Bob recognizes his limitations, and Linda doesn't recognize limitations, so they do balance each other really well because there's ways
mm.
that that's also what I love about Mazel Tina is that Linda can get Bob to go along with things. So when they end up in like the wedding rehearsal hall, um, they're like, "Oh, we're lost, but we're together. It's great." And as much as Bob loves the restaurant, you can see how much he cares for Linda. And except for maybe um, early Van and Cheyenne on Reba before they break them up, I can't think of many. Maybe Phil and Lil's parents on the original Rugrats, but it's so hard to think of a couple that love each other, that aren't toxic, complement each other. Maybe Monica and Chandler on Friends, but generally in sitcoms, a big part of my frustration and a big part of plot dynamic in these
Mm,
shows is the couple that is together that just hates each other and they've been together too long and it's an
mm.
absolutely monstrous kind of relationship. And Bob and Linda is such kind of a wonderful, beautiful kind of breath of fresh air. It's very much like
Yes.
the way I feel about Bob and Linda is the same reason that I watched something like As Time Goes By, where you get Judy Dench and what's his name, the guy that played Lionel, like rediscovering each other and falling in love at an older age with all their life
Mm,
experience. Bob and Linda's a couple that I will always root for and I love.
yeah.
And when I think about Bob in the gingerbread competition for Last Gingerbread House on the left, which is a great nod to a horror movie, by the way, which is also a great nod to Louise definitely convincing Bob they're going to cannibalize him at the dinner, which I kind of love. I can just see the Linda in Bob coming out when he decides he's going to win the competition because he has creativity inside of him, but feels like, except for the burger of the day, his dreams are very small. Like
Mm,
his real big dream seems to be a success, but it's such an undefined thing. And he's often willing to give up his chances at quote unquote true success for his family in a lot of ways, in good ways.
yeah.
Like he knows how to prioritize the thing that matters. Um, the
Mm,
reason I'm talking about Last Gingerbread House on the left instead of Father of the Bob, even though that is a great Christmas episode, I think that's an episode where you need to look at the dynamic of Bob and Big Bob in one fell swoop. So when we end up
yes.
talking about Father of the Bob, which I'd like to at some point, I also want to talk
Mm,
about the episode that follows it, which is the one about Bob realizing Teddy is his best friend, and the recent one where Big Bob opens up to Bob while they're doing dishes, which is the only highlight of that episode. But so that's why that's not on this particular list.
mm,
Um, I also love the Fish Odor Bob dynamic. Any episode with Fish
yes.
Odor and Bob together is great because when Fish Odor calls his tenant, who is paying him rent, and is like, "Bring me 5 foods," he knows that Bob make burgers. He's had burgers there before, but he doesn't care enough to retain the information. And Kevin Kline is one of my favorite character actors.
Yeah.
And it's so great to have Kevin Kline just like as a one-off occurring Bob's Burgers character as Fish Odor. I love the name, I love the look, I love the actor. Fish odor, I know he's a corrupt landlord. I'm not supposed to root for landlords, but like you can't help but love the guy that is running Wonder Wharf and somehow not running it into the ground. He got like
Mm,
there's so much I love
yeah.
about Fish odor that it kind of gets me past the grotesqueness of the landlordness of him.
Yes, he's definitely a complex character. He's not one-dimensional. In some episodes, he does play the antagonist role. I forget what it's called, the episode where he forces all of his tenants to run around a maze with
Yeah,
water
the
balloons and
the
such.
water balloon episode. That's one of the
Yeah.
season enders.
Mm,
That's where they all go on strike. I can't remember the name of the episode either. So
mm. But other times, like he's there for Bob, or he's interacting with the family in different ways and such. And I think he does have like a small amount of respect for Bob as a craftsman. I think he called him a beef artisan at some point. Might have been in the
yes,
pilot actually.
it was.
Like
Yeah, that wasn't the pilot because he Bob was trying to convince Fishoder to let him stay
yes,
in business by making him that really awesome rare burger that we never hear about again. But
yeah.
it's a really great way to make things happen.
And something I couldn't tell was whether Fischoeder rang Bob as his sort of first point of call. Like either I can't tell if he knew that Bob would just do it and like as his tenant, he was just like, I'm gonna call the first person I know. Or whether Fischoeder actually has some trust in Bob, and that's why he rang him sort of like as his first choice. It's a little hard to say, to be honest.
And they don't ever say, but I can imagine the inner dialogue of I need to call someone pathetic who I think will lose a competition or will at least agree to it. And his real other tenants are Mort, the funeral parlor guy, Edith and Harold, who are very old and very outspoken, that run Reflections, the art supply store, which is a great name for an art supply store, and a whole bunch of essentially unwashed carnies, as he probably thinks them. I don't know how many other places he owns because we don't see, but like in the
Mm,
episode where we meet the lady that runs the 77 sandwich shop, there's no
mm,
sense that she is part of the fish odor community. And you're not going to fight Jimmy
yes.
Pesto because it's very blatantly obvious that he is bad at running his Italian place. And also, he has kids that he has like a divorce thing. So I can imagine fish odor running through his tenants in his mind and going, yes, Bob, I'm going to call Bob. Bob will ruin this. Bob is perfect for this. Obviously, having done no research and not realizing how much Bob actually likes to build gingerbread houses, which was a pleasant surprise for
Mm,
me to find out that Bob, like, finding out the interesting stuff about the background characters, like, Bob does love doing gingerbread houses. And even though this is the first time we're hearing about it, that's completely in character for Bob. And
mm.
it's really great. The setup for it, the punchline of I'm going to be cannibalized. What's going on here? Oh, it's a gingerbread competition. Just the setup, the joke, the punchline, and then everything that happens afterward. It works so well because it happens pretty quickly
Yes.
too, which is nice.
Mm. And it's very in keeping with Fisher's character that he won't admit it, but he and his close friends, compatriots, like have this competition, which is really their way of having sort of like a Christmas get together sort of thing. But they don't frame it as a get together. They frame it as sort of like we're going to sit around a table and we're going to compete and force one of the loser to wear a toilet on his head,
Yeah.
basically.
I do love even Bob's Burgers' version of the rich upper class is
Mm.
not so hostile that you feel like they're super villains. Like they think they are in their own mind, but at the end of the
Yes.
day, they're not hostile. They're just eccentric and they have the money to go for it. They're like if the kids had money to do what they wanted,
Yeah.
they would be the eccentric rich people. And
Mm.
I love kind of these one-off characters we're never going to see again. Bob's does this really well. They did it in the Bleakening. They did it in Father of the Bob. I would argue one of the strongest suits of Bob's Burgers is both recurring and also just like background characters. The vegan speedo rollerblader, whose name we don't even know, appears every season. But you just learn little bits of information, and it's really great. And I enjoy it so much. I their names aren't on Wikipedia, so I didn't do as deep a dive as I normally do. But it's like Augie is one of them, and then
Yes.
there's the really old one in the corner who's supposed to be the judge, who's just like napping, which I appreciate.
Ernest was his name? It might have been
Ernest,
Ernest, but I
Augie.
forget.
Yeah,
Um,
so and they've all done rare animal cuddles, like that's one of their claims to fame. So they're playing for the albino polar bear cub unexpectedly comes back into the episode as like the reward for winning. Um,
yes, that's so
Also,
great.
the fact that they have to have a gun table to place your guns on, and they're all old timey revolvers, is really great because it's like not violent, but it's kind of the threat of violence, but it's like Bob's where they know where that line is.
Hmm.
And I think like, oh, just put your gun on the gun table, and Bob's like, well, I didn't bring a gun, and the rich old people are like, really, what an interesting choice. I find that incredible. Also, Bob looks really great in a suit. We don't see him dressed up very often, but when they dress him up, they know how to do it really well. For an animated character that basically lives in sweatpants, which I
I
appreciate.
mean, yeah, he looks great in a suit. He looks great in a sort of softcore Bleakening outfit as well, which we see in the next
Yeah,
episode.
it's really good. It's very kinky in that like Steps music video sort of way. I just discovered Steps. They never made it across the pond, and
Yes.
I discovered them last month. And I'm having such a good time with their kind of pop kink dystopia leather thing they're
Mm.
trying to do. I'm having a lot of fun
Uh,
with grown up steps. Oh, it's
if,
so good. I need them to be in the Bob's Burgers universe. I feel like Gene especially and maybe Tina would really because they have blades for now, but they really need like steps in the Bob's Burgers universe. I'm very much enjoying the step renaissance I'm living
mm,
currently. So
ah, um, so to loop back around to an earlier point, you mentioned about you thought that oh God, Teddy, that's it. You thought
yeah.
that Teddy was a driving point behind this episode.
Yes.
Why do you think that?
Yes, we're actually coming to it. That was my next point because we shift from the surprise of the gingerbread competition in the basement back to caroling.
Mm,
And here's where Teddy is the driving force of this episode. They're not having a lot of luck caroling. And that by itself is kind of funny, but kind of disappointing. It doesn't do anything. Teddy provides momentum in this episode. He does exactly what he did in the Tappy episode, where he
mm.
creates a scenario that is not real, but then freaks him out. So in the Taffy episode, he creates the drawing that's of the butt, which is pooping a little bit to make the kids think there's treasure and sets them off. Here, he creates this rumored, potentially fictional, we don't know, unreliable narrator story about this murder house in the middle of this Christmas tale, and like he freaks out Linda, he freaks out the kids, he freaks himself out, and we don't get any validity to the story, even from the guy that lives in the house, Oscar, when we later meet him. But I think Teddy is a driving force because without this story, without the mythology of this murder house, we basically just get Linda and the kids sad caroling. Um, but I think that Teddy, it's one of those things where when we talk about writing, you talk about major versus minor beats, and major beats
Mm.
are kind of a physical action. If you're watching a superhero movie, it's when Batman and Superman are punching each other instead of talking. Minor beats are all about the color of the story, the fiction of the world, the dialogue, the emotion. And Teddy is really good at being the uncle that has the weird stories because before he was a handyman, he was in the Navy. I think it was, they said in one episode. He was in like
Yes.
a military thing. He was like a set hand on the in world version of Jaws they did locally in the deepening. there's something really great about Teddy, and I think he's the driving force of this episode because without the murder house to fixate on with the kids,
Mm,
the gingerbread house plot isn't strong. It's strong, but it starts to fall apart a little bit if you don't have something strong beside it. You need the
yes.
you really
It needs a
need what
hook.
Teddy brings. Yeah, without the hook of
Mm,
it, I don't think it's as strong as an episode. It's playful, it's a little dark. It brings out the best and worst in the kids and Linda, and the unexpected reveal that is classic Bob's Burgers is a big part of it. And
mm,
I think that Teddy in a way is a driving force. Maybe the second half of the episodes. The first half of the episode, I'll give it's just like he's just caroling dad. You don't expect it. Second half of the
mm.
episode, I think Teddy really keeps that story going. And then there's an amazing. I don't know how to explain this other than to say it. There is an amazing version of a classic high church carol song along with gingerbread houses being shot by hidden guns. I mean,
Yeah,
I cannot
it's
think of another show that could pull off that kind of juxtaposition so well. And I yearn to be able to create the kind of art that makes something like that possible because I cannot think maybe like
the
old Rugrats could have done it, but even then,
mm,
it's a perfect counterpoint moment, and it's the reason
yeah,
why I watch this episode every year is because it makes it so special.
mm, yes. It it's definitely a very subtle episode about found family and how family spends Christmas together. And almost like odd little traditions as well, because the gingerbread thing is a tradition, and Linda wants the caroling to be a tradition for their
Yeah.
family, even though Bob's not really into it, and the kids are a bit like, until they get bribed with hot drinks.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Um,
Linda is definitely just one of those driving forces where, like,
mm,
if she had all the funds to do things, like, there'd be so much. There's something very zesty about Linda that
mm,
you because normally a mom in a sitcom is kind of this harangued, overworked, almost side character to the male
yeah,
antics.
mm,
Here, Linda Belcher,
yeah,
especially in the holiday episodes, feels a lot like Hilda and Zelda, where they're not
yes,
as encumbered. She has that kind of lesbian witch aunt vibe to her. Even though she's the matriarch of the family, she's
mm,
also very frank about her love of wine. She has a really strong relationship with her son to the point where they have episodes about how you learn to let go of the kids and her
yes,
deep desire to be loved by Louise and Louise pushing back on that. Like, she's so out there with
mm,
her desires, and it's such an admirable thing. And even when she fails, she wants so much to be, you know,
mm,
she really has a heart that it's so complex and so wonderful and so human.
mm,
And it's here in the episode, but it's not too heavy. It doesn't
yes.
feel overbearing, which is really nice.
Mm. The thing is, what you were just pointing out about like the difference between um Linda and mums from other animated shows, I think there really is a defining line between um so shows that took inspiration from The Simpsons in
Yeah,
that sense. So like The Simpsons, the reason I bring this up is The Simpsons as a massive trendsetter for a lot of adult, family orientated animated shows. In the later seasons, we did see Marge starting to become more of that haggled housewife and putting up with Homer's many antics, and that copied over into other shows like Family Guy and American Dad, where it became quite tropey
yeah.
um, in the setting. And then you have sort of like the new generation of animation, like Bob's Burgers and such, where they're
Great
actually saying,
North. I'd say Great North
as
probably
oh,
deserves to be
I
there.
was about to bring that up as something as a follow on from that. I was going to say
Yeah,
that Bob's Burgers kind of put its foot down and said, "No, you can show a lovely, loving, and wholesome family dynamic, but because their personalities are so quirky that you could still have a lot of fun with them at the same time. You don't need to have certain members of the family more hassled by the antics of the others.
Yeah.
And the Great North, I think, has taken a lot of cues from the Bob's Burgers example,
Yes.
in the same type of loving family dynamic, but they're still so quirky, but then they love the quirks about each other, and
Yeah.
that's what makes it so. To be frank, Bob's Burgers and The Great North to me tends to be a bit more watchable on repeat than, say, American Dad for that reason.
Yeah.
Like American Dad, you're just going into it and you know it's going to be a mess.
They do a lot different work. I think for
Yeah,
context for our listeners, you should know that the Bob Burger character archetypes existed long before Bob's Burgers.
yeah.
They existed maybe in the same time as The Simpsons, but the people that created Bob's have been doing it since there was a TV show Adult Swim did that I loved called Home Movies, where
Mm,
most of the cast of Bob's is not called what they are in Bob's, but you can see the archetypes. Andy and Ollie exist in that universe in different names, but with the same voices. They already exist there. Um, there's there's a special thing where Bob's Burgers is really more spiritually aligned with something like adult 90s animation like The Critic, where it's
mm,
making a point, but the point of Bob's, unlike where The Critic is trying to get people to think about what they're watching, the point of Bob's is to give people a reference for how to love weirdly and love people where they are. And I think holiday episodes generally showcase that the best because holiday episodes in other sitcoms don't feel as special. They generally do the It's a Wonderful Life or the Christmas Carol trope where someone is learning lessons. As a sitcom, even though it's animated, what Bob's does better than other sitcom holiday specials is it feels like a special for the holiday that doesn't feel so overwhelmingly about the holiday unless Linda is in charge, which is where the Bleakening is going to come up because it's time to talk about the Bleakening. So, the Bleakening is the biggest things Bob Burgers had done up to that point. So, this is season 8. So, it's a little over halfway through what we have now in America. I know that I think in Britain you're like a season behind or something on Netflix or wherever Bob's Burgers is.
I honestly couldn't tell you. Um, probably a season. Let's just say a season behind.
Let's say a season behind. So this
Yeah.
is 8, so less than halfway. And at the time, there had been the cookbook had come out, the unofficial Bob Burger cookbook that I have. There were rumors of a movie, but they were just kind of rumors. This is around the time, or maybe a little after, Simon Chong, who is now directing, did that Bob Burger Archer mashup video on YouTube that got him noticed and got him hired. Um,
Yes.
and so there was a lot of like groundswell movement for Bob, but we really
Mm,
didn't know where Bob was going to go. We were worrying they were kind of starting to run low on ideas. We were worrying about the quirkiness. We were kind of worrying about the future of the show, which was pretty unfounded. We'd had really great episodes at that point, like Fluise, which is one of my favorite season openers they'd ever done. Um,
mm,
but the Bleakening really blew me out of the water. It's a really big thing. It's a two-parter episode, which is not something Bob's or even most animated stuff outside of like Batman had done, especially in America. It
mm,
was just not something like I was prepared for. And this has some of the most unexpected music, some of the most unexpected ideas. Uh, one of the
mm.
voice actors is an unexpected cameo, and I think it's actually absolutely brilliant. I don't know if you actually know this. I was surprised to learn this. Do you
Oh,
know who voiced the artist in this episode?
no, go ahead.
Adam Driver. So
Good God.
that is
Really?
Adam Driver, voiced art the nude artist,
Wow.
slash B tier villain of this episode. Um, and it's just one of those Bob Burgers quirks that he's always going to now be a member of the Bob Burgers universe because of this. This is also
Wow.
a Teddy driven episode for two reasons. The first
Mm,
reason is that without Teddy, the Bleaken would not be a thing the kids know about. The parents know
mm.
about it, but they've apparently never brought it up. So instead of Krampus, they have the Bleaken in the Bob Burgers universe, which I love. Um, and then you get Teddy rescuing Bob, who is in kink gear and running from the cops and very overweight. And Bob is doing, and Teddy is doing this whole other side plot about catching the person stealing ornaments. And they run
Yes.
into each other, and Teddy essentially saves Bob from going to jail because Bosco is like all up and ready to like chase down the bad guy. And so
Mm.
like Teddy really here as the eccentric uncle who loves the family saves the family. Um, and it's a really there's so many things that would not have happened in this episode had Teddy not talked about the Bleaken because I can't picture a reason for the kids to leave the house
Yes.
on Christmas Eve without
No,
Teddy's story.
very true. He set them on their quest and they
Yeah.
go, and that's a great finale to the first part of the um episode where the kids sneak out at night to go and search for the Bleaken. Um, and it
With
kind of really adds some actual stakes to the whole episode as you see them wandering off
yeah,
into the snow and everything. Um, because in a way, as kids, like if you're watching as a kid, you're like, oh, they're going off to find the Bleaken. You're watching as an adult, you're like, the children have gone off by themselves at night in the dark, scary town.
yeah, it's
So,
also
yeah.
so the Bleakening was also proof of concept for the movie. Essentially, it was proof
Mm,
that you could take this half an hour, 22 minutes with commercials and actually make a movie from the concept, from the weirdness of the universe, and make something really strong. If the Bleakening had not been as good as it was, we never would have
mm.
gotten that movie. Which is one of the few things I saw in cinema proper during COVID actually. Um,
I will raise my hand and say we haven't seen it yet. We
okay,
missed it in the cinema. Um, it Having rewatched Bob's Burgers recently for this episode, it did completely remind me about the film's
yeah,
existence. So, would you say that the film is worthwhile seeing?
I think it's good. I think the Bleakening is better,
Oh,
honestly.
okay.
I don't think it's bad. I think the film is really good. I think it depends on how you feel about something in a kind of a fantasy realm like Flights of the Concord. It kind of
Okay.
depends on how willing you are to take Bob's Burgers at its word and how much you're willing to look for plot holes. I think you should see it. I'm not saying you
Mm,
shouldn't. I think it's something that should be watched. But I also think that as far as the movie versus particularly talking about the Bleakening,
yes.
I think the music in the Bleakening is better. I think it drives the plot more. I think there is a better sense of danger in this, although there is sense of danger in the Bob Burger movie for the people who
Mm,
have seen it. I'm not discounting that. But this danger feels more in line with the atmosphere of Bob's, whereas the movie really ramps it up. And you are very worried that this is the end of the series at certain points in the movie.
mm,
Also, I just like the holidays more. So setting a movie during summer and watching it at a time and not summer, I can watch The Bleakening anytime and lose myself in it. I'm
mm,
very present in the movie. I know exactly when it takes place. They talk about it. The opening song is very strong in the movie, whereas I feel like the songs in the Bleakening get progressively stronger until we're at the point of Teddy singing "Do You Hear What I Hear?" but remastered with new words, which is amazing. Um,
oh,
there's something where this episode just gets stronger and stronger. The beginning is okay of the Bleakening. Yes, we're all sad about Christmas. Yes, the weird is off. I actually think
yeah.
I actually think Linda's best Christmas song that she sings in the opening is actually the least strong song of this entire two
Mm.
part. I know that's going to be controversial yet brave. Hashtag controversial yet brave. Um, but for me, the episode only gets stronger. So by the time the kids are doing their rock rendition of the Bleaken Will Wish He's Never Was Born, I think that rock rendition of the Bleaken song is great. And then when you get the reprise in the second part where they're actually in danger and they're actually afraid, I think that's even better because especially if you keep your um closed captionings on, they actually like verbalize Tina doing like the grunting in the back for rhythm. So like they've got like rhythmic grunts as a closed captioning feature, and I feel like if you have a song done in that manner, you should have the rhythmic grunts as closed captioning. And I think it works because that's definitely Tina's strength because she's not a singer. No, I love the
No.
girl, but singing is not one of her special gifts and or talents. Um, I
Mm.
love everything about the Bleakening. Sergeant Bosco as a side character, as that henpecked sergeant in the police forces who is both an ally and an absolute hindrance to everything the family wants to ever do, is great.
Mm.
Every time there's a Bosco episode, the one with his mom and the quilting thing with Edith, Sergeant Bosco, and the episode, any Sergeant Bosco episode brings me joy. And I think here there's just enough of Sergeant Bosco that you see enough of him and then you want no more of him.
Mm.
Just enough Bosco in this episode. And
Yes.
definitely Edith. I love the fact Linda cannot make eggnog to save her life. It's a very small joke,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, Linda's inability to make eggnog in any
Yes.
capacity is so
Oh,
good.
it's great. Oh, that's nasty.
That's nasty. And you have to, and that's a
That's
marshmallow
nasty.
thing too. Marshmallow is great. The subplot of the Bleakening is that this small town gay bar is being shut down and people are absolutely mourning their place being gone. That is a real thing that happened. There is a real
Yes.
heart to this episode. This episode is not just a fantasy about this universe's version of Krampus. Yes, there is that,
Oh, yeah.
but more to the point, the idea of losing a space for development, which comes up and up again in Bob's Burgers around the finales usually, is very present
Mm.
here. And I think it's really important to acknowledge this episode is very gay. This Christmas special is
Okay.
so incredibly gay, and it's amazing. When we say everything is gay, even the straight stuff, this is just straight up gay. Like
Okay.
there's like it's a
Oh, yeah, there's
Christmas
no hiding it.
rave. Linda's like on a pill at the end of the episode. Like someone like put some rush in her nose or something, I guess.
Oh God, yeah.
I don't even know what it
It's
was, but it was just somebody gave her something and she
right.
was just up and then she
Yeah.
was down. It was amazing.
Bob's is usually a bit more subtle with the adult jokes and such, but
Yeah.
they were
Well,
just straight up like, straight on with that
well
one.
what's great is
I'm just gonna check she's got a pulse.
that's a callback to season. I think it's season one in Sheesh Cab Bob, the episode where Tina turns 13. They're having her birthday party and she wants to kiss some
Mm.
Jimmy. So like Bob is openly really okay with trans people. The episode is a little cringy now, based on terminology. So if you're going to go back and watch it, no, it is a little cringy, but that's sort of based on age and sort of based on things that weren't conversations yet for us
Yeah.
about how we represent people on
Mm.
TV. But it's one very minor fault that Bob's has done their
Ooh,
best to reconcile for.
yeah.
But in that episode, Bob openly talks about I may have tried crack. So like this is Linda having her I may have tried crack moment. It's okay. This family
Mm.
is a family of open people, experimenting people, passionate people, and it's not hard. Like it seems very in line with Linda. She's had a really hard year. She's trying to make Christmas happen so much.
Yes.
She's like squeezing the Grinch's neck, it feels like, trying to make Christmas happen.
Mm.
Um there's something so special about the two parts of these together. I hate that it's a two-parter because I just kind of want to watch it without having to like click on the next episode. Because it really is The continuity's good, the danger is good, the music is good, the animation is good. It doesn't, cause so for the movie itself, they did up the animation a little bit, which is nice. But I actually like classic Bob Burger animation. Like by the time they get to season 8, it's very polished. I feel
Yes.
comfortable. I know what it's going to look like. The expectation is there. I can really enjoy it
Mm.
without worrying that they're trying a new art format.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
And I think they go a bit subtler with the whole with the aesthetic and such. So one thing I really noticed whilst I was watching this two-parter was starts off with Linda having her dream and her sing song and such. But it primarily the two parts primarily starts off in the day with Linda's tree going missing, etc., which sets everything in motion.
yeah,
The day progresses, it turns to night, and it features the family going into darker and like deeper underground places. And it kind of, in that sense, to my mind, it fits there's a couple of ways that the show's title, The Bleakening, fits in with what's going on in this two-parter. Um, to the point where you pretty much are underground, but then all of a sudden there's all this bright lights and flashing from from the club lights and such. So it'd been growing bleaker, but then that was disrupted by them reaching that point and coming past that. But then Linda almost becomes the Grinch herself for almost ruining everything and bleakening everyone's Christmases by coming the Bleaken pretty much indeed. And it's only through the family coming together that they managed to rectify that
yeah.
mistake. So there's a few. I love it when they get clever in different ways to match what's going on with with their titling and such.
And I think that is it does kind of speak to the adult experience of Christmas.
Yeah,
There's a very like it's so hard to like put into words, but there's a different way you celebrate Christmas. I talk about the idea when I used to go to church eons ago. I talked about the
yeah,
idea of Christmas was for kids and Advent was for adults. So like the way that
mm,
we celebrate the holidays changes as we age.
yeah,
Um, and I feel like the Bleakening does a good job of showcasing both those experiences. It also showcases how different Gene is and his expectations. Because Gene is not about stuff. He really wants a gift card for experiences for food. And like that's like when I was 10 and I asked for like French cafe doors because my room was right off of the kitchen. Like it's such a kids are a different beat of their own drummer type of thing, and it's so good
yes,
to have that in Bob's. I guess they go a little off the wall sometimes, but like there's something really great about how Bob's showcases regular size Rudy, especially. I think is one of my favorite characters in
yeah,
TV, probably for how children are, because he's so femme, but in a mask way. And I kind of love that
yes,
it allows kids to be that. It doesn't feel like the boy has to be one way, girl has to be the other way. Because in sitcoms, especially, you really feel that. Um, yeah.
we could have like a proper breakdown of the queer undertones of Louise, Jean, and Tina's little friend group because there's a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
shades of
Well,
gay
I mean,
within
friend is a
that. But
strong word. It feels like Tina's kind of held hostage by adolescence rather than that she feels like a lot of common bonds with these kids. I honestly think Tina
yeah,
could do better, but that's not the point of this episode. We're talking about the
no, no,
Bleakening.
no.
Um,
Mm.
I have to
But
say, when I first saw this episode, the highlight was the drag queen name, going from Miss Leave It to Beaver to Miss Triple Xmas. I had to stop the episode, rewind, how about we rewind in this day and age because we don't really rewind anything. I had to like go back, listen to it again, look at my friend. We both like
yeah.
laughed for a solid 4 minutes. It's such a good drag name, and I'm so angry. I'd never thought of it before. Just leave it to Beaver. It's so good, and I'm so angry about it. And then Miss Triple Xmas in like her Elsa Frozen doing twinkly lights
Yes.
in like this wonderful gospel tone in the middle of this Christmas rave underground. after having had to solve these puzzles and go through this thing that Linda doesn't understand is a fake mural. I love that Linda just doesn't get it, and but she's willing to go
Yeah.
with Bob there. There's something so
Yes.
great about like how the episode just gets better as it progresses. It never
Mm.
feels like an episode that has to slow down. It just keeps going in a really good. It's so hard to
Yeah.
explain because it has
It's
to do with like a technical writing thing, but it's
mm.
something you just also become better at as you do the art of it. And it's
Yeah.
something where you can see the skill of the Bob's Burgers people pushing further. And it's something that you
Yes.
see in the film of how they push the art form of what they specifically do further in a good way.
I mean, realistically, this is just one story. I know it's in a two-parter format, but that's due to the limitations of the show being able to have they're not able to have longer episodes. Instead, they have to split into two parts and such. You know that you how you said earlier on that you hate having to like sort of click to go to the next episode
Yeah.
because it sort of breaks the immersion. And that's a great way of saying it. This episode is incredibly immersive and you could just watch it in one sitting. It is a shame that has to be
Well, and
in
this
two hours,
is
basically.
one of the very, very few, because there are very few episodes of this that does not have a series title or opening title sequence on it.
Mm,
They just go right into the episode. They don't give
yeah.
you the pun at the beginning in the close shop. They don't give you the re opening sign. They just go right into it. One of the things about Bob's that has kind of gone into decline for me in the series as a whole is that kind of finale credit music. I don't think they always need it, and they've been doing it every single episode recently, and I'm feeling about it. But here it's appropriate. The ending of this episode, this two-parter episode, with the entire cast of characters of Bob's in their various singing voices, singing or not, doing Twinkly Lights, is absolutely brilliant, and it's kind of the thesis of Bob's Burgers, is that everyone
Mm,
is different, but they all contribute something
yes.
to make the things happen. And I absolutely think it's great that they brought Kevin Kline in for like 10 seconds to do like three words, and then Christmas was done with Kevin Kline. It's such a good way to kind of wrap up a Bob's Mean and be like, if we're not getting a movie, if this wasn't enough, we've done what we set out to do and we feel really good about it. There's something very secure in what Bob's Burgers does as part of an animation where it's not a groundbreaking art form, but it is because so often we had a TV show about a family that either loves each other beyond reason and it's super
Yeah.
saccharine, like Full House, where everybody just makes concessions, or it's overly embattled and way too honest, like Roseanne or Home Improvement, where just
Yeah.
people are just hurting each other left and right. Um, Bob's Burgers for me is quite a bit like the same reasons we love Sabrina. I feel like in that it has such a layered kind of world within a world feeling to it, and
Mm,
that there's a community feel. And even though they are technically blood family, I feel like if they were found family, they would still almost have the same rhythm if they were like all like if they were
yes.
doing a Friends where they all lived in the same apartment building and just saw each other all the time. Granted, it wouldn't be the
Yeah.
same series, it wouldn't have the same energy. There's something about them as a blood family that also feels found family. Their adoption of
Mm,
Teddy, the adoption of Rudy, the adoption of
mm,
Andy and Ollie, who haven't been really seen that much in the last couple of seasons, but are still kind of there in the background. Like, there's a way that
yeah.
they
Mm,
adopted the town into their lives that really makes it feel like it's so much not just about it's not Cheers where people are coming for a burger. It's where for better or worse that are going out and the community is responding to them for better or worse.
yes. Mm. No, it comes back to in my thoughts, it comes back to what I said before that to me the greatest strength about Bob's is its heart and how these people are just there for each other. Um, like there's no the comedy for Bob's it never makes fun at the expense of anyone. Everyone is generally there for each other, and the comedy comes from like the quirky weirdness of people rather than, um, oh look at this person. Aren't they a bit foolish? Ha 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 ha. It never comes like that. With like the children and their adventures and such, the parents like the only time the parents are against the kids doing anything, like in this, like with the Bleakening, it's because of their safety and they shouldn't be out after hours when, there's danger possibly about. But they never belittle the kids and treat them as they're being like silly or anything else.
Because
Rather, quite
yeah,
often, the parents are there and they support the kids in their quirkiness. Um,
yeah, and that's partially
and
because of the parents of who they are and how Bob and
yes,
Linda really do seem to be. They have their restaurant, but more often than not, the restaurant feels kind of like a hindrance to the people they really are.
yeah,
Like it was a
well,
great way to start, but it feels now like it's kind of in the way of the show
yeah,
almost in the last couple of seasons.
well,
It started to
but
feel like they want to move out of the restaurant.
yeah, but that's the thing. Like Bob's has never like the thing with Bob. He's always been like, I want to make my restaurants a success because that's my dream. But quite more often than not, he and Linda they're doing the restaurant to make ends meet. And I think Bob so there's always been it's very clear, it doesn't say it, but it's always been clear that Bob may not be successful in the restaurant business, but he has his true treasure is his devoted family life. And that is where like he succeeds and where, he has really found success. And you look at Jimmy Pesto, who's the complete opposite. Yeah, he has a successful business, but at the end of the day, like his family life doesn't seem to be all that close, and he really does yearn for what Bob has.
Yeah.
There's an intense jealousy there.
Oh yeah.
And Jimmy just cannot, for life of him, admit it. That's probably the only real example of that actually I can think of the entire show. I don't think anyone else has this sort of lingering. I don't know
I
how to
think
describe it.
Tammy does. I think Tammy does for Tina.
Oh,
But
that's a good.
I think that is another episode. Because I think
Yes,
that is
sorry.
so I think because I want people to be able to take time to watch these episodes that they haven't. I want to be
True.
able to wrap up. So let's wrap up with kind of a sensational question. The question is, which of the weapons that Louise brings to fight the Bleaken with is the best weapon? Because she
Optimus Prime.
brings no, no, not of the weapons she actually brings. She does not bring an Optimus Prime robot to fight the Bleaken. That is
Damn it.
good. You have to decide which Optimus Prime you want for that. I do think the ruler is the best of the weapons that she brings, but I can see use for the keychain. I think she brings either a key and a keychain or something. But the stabbing is nice, but I think the ruler is
Yeah.
probably most effective of the weapons.
Yeah, very true. If you tried to shove the key ring down the Bleaken's throat, it would probably just bite your hand off, to be honest.
Yeah, it
So,
has very sharp teeth, and
yeah.
it beats bad children with reeds. By the way, if you've never read the Krampus
Mm,
story, it's very intense. This is a very intense
oof.
anti Santa. Um,
Yep.
I was I really love talking about these. I love talking about Bob's because it's such a counterpoint to kind of what in the '90s we called the TV wasteland. There's something really wonderfully eccentrically optimistic about Bob's that you don't see in other TV, and it doesn't feel like that's tacked on to a holiday special the way sometimes I feel like it is in other
Yeah.
shows. Um, I think these fit in so well that even if it was like Treehouse of Horror and these weren't canon episodes, you could
Mhm.
make them canon. Um,
Yes.
I am always excited for Bob Burger holiday episodes, and I'm looking forward to whatever the one this year is.
Mm.
And I look forward to whenever I next rewatch Last Gingerbread House on the Left and the Bleakening. I tend to do Thanksgiving episodes on Thanksgiving Day after the parade. Um, so like before I get to my turkey, I'm watching like Turkey in a
Yes.
Can and Dawn of the Peck, which if we ever do Bob Burger Thanksgiving episodes, Dawn of the Peck
Like, mm.
is the most amazing. The zombie turkey, the idea of replacing zombies with turkeys is just an incredible, like, I don't know how they thought of it, but I'm so happy it exists.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would be happy to do a conversation about that in the future. And if our listeners want to um, ask for any other specific discussions around Bobs and such, like maybe there's certain episodes that really struck a chord with people and they want us to do a little breakdown analysis of it. I'd be happy to do a conversation about that as well.
as long as I don't have to try to do the Linda voice. I don't think I have it. I've tried it. I don't sound like Linda. I'm much closer to Bob, and even then, his fabulous baritone, which made his can role in Wet Hot American Summer even better, was just amazing. I've been a big fan of the Bob Burger family since Home Movies, and so I knew coming into Bob what it could be because Home Movies, it's such an incredible experience about this kid who is not good at school but wants to be a filmmaker, but he has no original ideas to save his life, and his single mother mom. If you've never seen Home Movies, it's an incredible peek into what would become Bob's. And I'm hoping maybe
Mhm.
one day we'll do Home Movies, or The
Yeah.
Critic, because I loved '90s kind of quote unquote adult animation.
Okay.
But that's for the future. And I
Yeah.
will also say now, because we are coming to the holidays, we are going to be taking a bit of a break. So we'll have another episode after this one, which I
Mm.
think we've decided we're going to do the Santa Claus, the Tim Allen movie,
Yes.
is what we decided. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to take a break and come back to you in January. If you have anything you'd love us to cover, if you'd love me to finally to kind of gush about steps and then get all the tea from when it was actually happening from Magnus, we can talk about steps. I'd love to talk about if you have films, you want us to talk about TV shows. Um, I'm even open to looking at different graphic novel series if you want to talk about the
Mm.
Batman Who Laughs,
Yeah.
or if you'd like to talk to us about the Power Ranger Boom comics, which are starting up
But,
a new series
but
soon. So
mm, which is perhaps one of the most exciting things to happen in Power Rangers franchise for quite some time. I know they've been going on for a few years
yeah.
now, but what they're doing is really pushing the franchise, I think, to
It's right
different
up
ways.
there with my, so I have the tabletop game and my podcast where I am GMing as Zordon for a Power Ranger tabletop game experience will be coming out in the new year. So it's quite a bit like that. But
Mm,
yes, so if you have things that you want us to discuss, we are definitely open.
mm,
We are listening. You can use our YouTube archives and any of the videos there. If you're listening to us through Anchor, there should be a link on there. If you're listening to us through any of the other things, everything is gay, even the straight stuff. The email address is everythingisgaypodcast@gmail.com. But I think if you type in everything is gay podcast into YouTube, you should be able to find us. No problem. It's us. It's very us, and we're listening for the things that you want to talk about into the new year for season two. Because after we talk about the Santa Claus, season one will be a wrap. And I've had a lot of fun doing a year of this with you, of getting to talk about pop culture and really
Oh
getting to
yes.
break down. It's a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun. So yeah,
And we have by no means exhausted what we can discuss.
we've
There's a
only
lot
just
out
begun.
there.
As the kids say on the YouTube, this is only level one of the iceberg.
Wow. Imagine if we had our own iceberg. Yeah.
Oh, that's a big ice. I'd like to think that if we did Bob's Burgers as like this really long thing, we'd actually end up with an iceberg because I think there's a lot in it to discuss. But for another time, and
Yeah.
another place. I want to thank you all. I want to wish you all listeners and both of us, plenty of holiday magic. I'm also
Mm,
very excited for those of you that were able to get into Magnus's Kickstarter. I've seen pictures of the calendar online, and so I'm very excited um, that people will have a piece of Magnus to hang in their home for the holiday season. That doesn't sound good
and
when I say
same
it.
for me,
It
yeah, it's
sounded
fun.
it sounded really good in my head, but when I said it out loud, I thought maybe that
I
didn't sound as
I
good.
was I was wondering how that was going to sound. I could tell the
Yeah.
direction you were going in, and I was thinking, "Hmm." But I suppose people wouldn't mind having my gorgeousness on their walls, which is the main thing.
It's true, you are gorgeous. It's a real shame
Oh.
you can't see this the way that I'm seeing it because you're listening in podcast. But we'll be back next time, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and I wish you all a good night and beware the Bleaken, for they come to take your gifts away, even your gift
Yeah.
cards, because those are experiences you can steal. Have a good evening,
Au revoir, everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.